Jay Gould's daughter said before she died, Daddy, oh Daddy, don't let the bums ride. If ride they must, let 'em ride on the rod. They can put their lives into the hands of God. In the hands of God. In the hands of God. Let 'em put their lives in the hands of God.
So I almost forgot, I'm trying to give a little history lesson with each of these lessons if it's applicable. And it certainly is in the case of Jay Gould's daughter. So Jay Gould's daughter was a real historical person. He was born, I believe, in the 1830s up in New York to a pretty modest family. His father was a farmer up there. And apparently at a very early age, he had a falling out with his father. And I guess he was a book smart little kid. And he said, I don't want to be a farmer like you. And so his dad sort of disowned him and kicked him out of the house. And the story is that he actually rode him down the road to a boarding school or something and ditched him at the school with a bag of clothes. And apparently that was the last of it. But Jay Gould, pretty quickly, he got jobs as a bookkeeper, pretty smart kid. And before you knew it, he was in the currency of today's currency, he would have been a billionaire. But he became a very wealthy man by the time he died. And he died in the early 1890s of tuberculosis, I believe, which is interesting. But controversial figure. He was a railroad tycoon, and I guess he was notoriously rough on the railroad, the hobos and travelers who rode on the railroads. They did it quite a bit back in those days. People still do that, but people really did it back then. So he was universally hated by the railroad bums, the hobos. And so that's what that song is about. Jay Gould's daughter is them trashing his daughter. He had 6 kids, Jay Gould did, and I think he had a daughter who died before he did, and people hated Jay Gould so much that they composed that mean song about his daughter. So in the song, the 2 main verses are, Jay Gould's daughter said before she died, Daddy, don't let the bums ride. Let them ride on the rod and put their lives in the hands of God. So riding on the rod is sort of railroad lingo for, I don't know the details, but it's some piece of equipment like the trestle or rod that runs underneath a freight car. And if the train is all locked up appropriately, that's the only place to ride on those old trains, is on that rod that is literally just underneath like the axle of the boxcar. So it's a very dangerous, very hard way to ride. So forcing people to do that was considered pretty rough. And then the other verse is, early one morning it began to rain. Round the bend come a passenger train. Sitting on the bumper is Hobo John. He's a good old rounder, but he's dead and gone. And so that kind of references, like, and here's somebody who died, because of the harsh treatment of the railroad bulls and stuff like that. So I don't know, a little bit of history there with our friend. Okay, so I just showed a little demonstration of the overhand approach and the 2-finger approach to playing an old sort of 1890s ragtime period song called Jay Gould's Daughter. I learned Jay Gould's Daughter and most of my repertoire from George Gibson of Knott County, Kentucky. And I believe I only ever saw George play this tune one time, and he kind of does a 2-finger sort of up-picking technique where he's throwing a lot of brushes into his 2-finger technique, and I tried to emulate some of that there. So one thing George did was when he went to the second part, I like to just go. George would do kind of a, and what he's doing is he's brushing up on all the strings with the back of his thumbnail. That's something that I learned from George Gibson, although I seldom do it. It's not a comfortable technique for me. Somebody who incorporates that into his banjo playing a lot is John Haywood, up there in Kentucky as well. John lives in Whitesburg these days, I believe, which I think that's in Letcher County. I'm not sure. Anyhow. So look up John Haywood if you want to see somebody do a lot of those thumb drags. He does it frequently, and I'm pretty sure he learned that from George Gibson. But anyhow, so we're going to go through the quick verbal rundown of how to play this, and I'm going to demonstrate, more of the technique. If you are somebody who wants to learn from tablature, I will throw a link up here right now. This link will take you to patreon.com/Clifton Hicks for a very modest contribution. It is less than the cost of one beer or one coffee for an entire month. Or you can pay annually, so it's only just a few dollars a year. Anyhow, that link will take you there, and for that modest contribution, you get the tab for this and every other song that we teach here on this channel. Okay, so without further ado, the banjo tuning is basically F sharp D, F sharp A D. We call it old Reuben tuning. Reuben tuning. It's the same tuning you use for Reuben's Train, Train 45. I've always been a rambler. John Henry. Anyhow. So, and you can start it out. The whole song is built off of this movement. This movement, and then barring at the 4th and the 5th fret. So if you can do this, and you can play the tune. So that's basically all it is to it. So you start off, if you want to say, Jay Gould's daughter said before she died, Jay Gould's daughter said before she died. So all I'm doing there is I'm walking it back for a first string at the 4th fret, then going back to the 2nd fret, then play it open. Then you got to walk down to this open 3rd string. You can do it however you want to do it. You can just walk down some way, and then you can immediately bar with your whole index finger across the 4th fret. Barring is tricky at first. I find it's easier if I use all of my fingers to support that barring trigger finger. So I'm not just trying to do this. Other thing I'm doing, my thumb position changes when I bar. Typically I hold the banjo like that. When you go to bar down here, it's necessary to take more of a classical guitar style grip and put your thumb on the back of the neck. And so I'm not just pinching with my thumb and forefinger, I'm actually using all of my fingers on top of it. I get a lot better control that way. So that's one way. You'll never figure out how to bar if you're trying to bar like this and looking all fucking goose-winged or whatever. You need to put your thumb back there and bar with all those fingers supporting your trigger finger. So you walk in from Jay Gould's daughter said before she died. So you just kind of before she died. And I like to do a bar, sliding on your bars is a really neat sound. Before she died, daddy, oh daddy, don't let the bums ride. So the way you get that's sort of a classic George Gibson technique, is these little double thumbs. And you don't have to do that, but that's how I like to do it. So Jay Gould's daughter said, before she died, daddy, oh daddy, don't let the bums ride. If ride they must, let them ride on the rod. They can put their lives in the hands of God. In the hands of God. In the hands of God. Let them put their lives in the hands of God. You'll also notice that whenever I'm just playing open strings between verses, I'm noting that 3rd string at the 3rd fret. That gives you nice full chord shape sound. That's not necessary. You can do it that way too, but I think it sounds a little prettier if I hold that note in between. very subtle. It's up to you if you want to do that or not. So, in the hands of God, in the hands of God, in the hands of God, in the hands of God. I'm not going to go into detail. If you need to see note for note how I play the little double note ditties when I'm doing this, that's going to be in the tablature, which you can click up here and you get that tab for a very reasonable price. But basically just in the hands of God, in the hands of God, in the hands of God. Let them put their lives in the hands of God. And all I'm doing to close out that second part is I'm just riding that bass string. You can do it very simply or you can do it complex. So they can put their lives in the hands of God. Put their lives in the hands of God. You could play the whole thing on the second fret, but I kind of find myself, I don't do it the same way twice. I like to go, they put their lives in the hands of God. In the hands of God, in the hands of God. Let them put their lives in the hands of God.
What in the world is that?